Good day, fight fans. It's Dallas Winston, Bloody Elbow. I've been on a multifaceted hiatus for many, many reasons. I know you missed me. Just kidding. I know you didn't notice. I'm with Zane Simon today. Zane, hi.
Hey, I'm glad you can make it, Dallas.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that kind of thing. And I am going to front you a fruit or muffin basket of your choice for continually being so patient and flexible with your schedule compared to my chaotic schedule. So thank you for that.
Well, all right. Maybe I'll do a combo of fruit and muffins, like an
Whoa!
apple and
I'm not
oh,
ready
I
to
see
take
how
that
far
step.
that gratitude goes.
We're just going. We're at level one friendship right now. We're going to start with the muffin basket, and we'll see where that leads. I don't want to commit any further.
Oh,
I don't like to
you know,
jump into anything.
I'm already starting to feel lied to and cheated on here.
Well, that's all part of the fun of the Dallas Winston relationship. So we're going to do a very quick and abridged show today. There are many things behind the scenes, many things, many ins and outs working. So we're doing the show painfully late, and we are just going to blast through the four main card fights for Bellator 129. Those matchups include, ladies and gentlemen, Davin Clark versus Joe Vidapo, newcomer and lucha libre practitioner Andre Santos versus a guy who I think has been flying under the radar screen unfairly for a very long time, James Terry. The original main event for this was Houston Alexander versus James Thompson. James Thompson was injured, so now Houston Alexander is fighting Virgil Zwicker in the co-main, and Paul Bradley and Josh Neer take the main event slot. Your thoughts overall, good sir?
Not a strong card. Not made weaker by the loss of James Thompson. I gotta say.
Yeah, that wasn't a giant. Although that kind of would have been a fun fight. And actually, Virgil Zwicker, he's a Kumeyaay Indian,
Hmm.
tough guy, big slugger. So it's not going to be one of those where you're going to want to call all your friends and have them watch it to soak in the illustrious technique. But could be a fun fight. I have to agree, though, overall, we're kind of coming towards the end of the Bjorn Rebney era of cards, which is not a bad thing, but the Scott Coker magic will kick in probably, I'm guessing, in a show or two, maybe three.
Yeah, I'm kind of just waiting for the season to be over and then to see where they go from there, and that's when I'm really looking for what is the first non-season card going to look like?
And at that point, I do think that they're going to go a little more monthly rather than weekly. I think that's when we're going to start to see a change. Although I believe, let's see, next week is not a big name card, but fairly intriguing. Emmanuel Newton and Linton Vassell, Bobby Lashley, Carl Etherington, a couple of UK guys getting a shot. But after that is the big Tito Bonner, Chandler Brooks.
Yeah,
So that should be a nice breath of fresh air. And then after that, it will be, let's see what Scott Coker can do with it. I'm not talking very fluently
yeah.
today. Yeah.
I'm definitely once we're in this sort of weird sort of it's like the lame duck season where now the season idea obviously has its foot out the door and we're just gonna have to see what comes afterward when it finishes out. It's kind of my thought.
Yeah, I get the sentiment. Let's start them off. What do
Yeah.
you think here? First matchup, Davin Clark, newcomer. I want to say 5-1, training out of AKA, very unknown, not even a lot of footage on him. Versus Joe Vidapo, known wrestler. I think he had one, maybe two fights in the UFC. Totally off the top of my head, so that could be blatantly
Yeah,
incorrect.
Vitapo's been around for a long time. Like I even somebody mentioned this to me today, and I didn't even think about it that he was fighting, but that he had like a profile in GQ magazine back in like 2001.
Did he really?
Yeah,
Why? No
I
offense,
don't
Joe.
know,
Uh,
or
Weird.
something like that. Maybe it was, but he's been fighting since 2005 in MMA, and so he's been around forever and ever. Fought in the UFC a couple of times, lost to Rob Kimmons and Alessio Sakara, has bounced around a while, been in and out of Bellator for the past few years, and is on a two-fight win streak coming into this fight against a guy who hasn't fought in 2 years. So I really don't know what to expect out of this.
And I think his last main card fight, which was his first main card, was against Kendall Grove. It was a loss, but Joe Vidapo is the type where he's got a big heart. He's not like wildly talented, but he's a good wrestler, mostly known just for his grit. And actually, I don't want to spend a lot of time in the rearview mirror, but I was pretty damn impressed with Kendall Groves showing against Christian Pumbu. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a lunch money style beating.
it was.
So I think and I have a lot of respect for Kendall, and I don't hold that against Joe too bad. And this is kind of tough because he's been trying to nip away at kind of the top echelon of fighters. Davin Clark might be that. He trains out of AKA. He's a former college football player, extremely athletic, new to the game. The only footage I could find on him was a pretty shoddy YouTube video of someone recording with their cell phone the large screen on the arena, but you still could get a feel for it, and the guy looks to be very, very comfortable on his feet, fluid boxer, especially for a guy with not a lot of experience.
Well, kind of not a lot of experience-ish. He's also been fighting since 2007, but he just hasn't fought much in that time. It's the kind of guy who's fought like once a year. It didn't fight at all in 2010 and hasn't fought since 2012. So just a guy who doesn't have or hasn't had a lot of pro fights, but has certainly been around the sport for a little while.
I think we'll kind of both agree that he's going to be a giant question mark. I mean, he could come out and blow us away, or I mean, he could do the opposite. But I do think from what little I've seen on him and know about him that he will not just be your standard prospect. I think when you have a guy who's strong game, comes from a really good camp, and is at least shown a good grasp of proficiency in at least one skill, at the very least, I mean, to me, that's like the minimum amount that you need to have.
Well, yeah, and no slight to Vidapo here, but it does kind of feel a bit like he's being set up as that like decent but beatable guy that your prospect beats to get over and sort of get known to fans. And this feels a bit like that kind of fight where it's like Vidapo, not a bad fighter, but not the most athletically gifted guy in the world. Kind of a solid grinder, the kind of guy who's going to give you 3 rounds to work with a lot and who, tends to lose to better athletes when he fights them.
And on the flip side, he's not easy to beat. I mean, he
Yeah.
might not have a super dynamic skill set, but if you have a wrestler and a grinder who's just tough as hell and will not quit, I do agree it's a decent canvas to see what Davin Clark can do, but at the same time, far from a pushover fight.
Oh,
And
yeah.
really, from Davin Clark's standpoint, a couple steps up the ladder as far as what he's faced in past competition.
Yeah.
Betting odds have it fairly tight. Vidapo's a slight favorite at minus 160 to minus 185, and Davin Clark coming in at plus 135 up to plus 150. So I think that's pretty fair considering the circumstances. Yeah?
Yeah, very much. I mean, the guy's been out for 2 years. When somebody's been out that long, there's no good way to tell where they are.
Unless he fights a guy like Joe Vidapo, so I think it's sensible.
Yeah.
And I believe that's going to open up the broadcast. Second fight is another newcomer, Andre Santos, a Brazilian. He does train out of the Hanau fight team, which is basically kind of been like the Luta Livre factory, almost single-handedly bringing some credibility back to and some attention back to the art of Luta Livre. So this guy's a Luta Livre black belt, really experienced. What's his record? 36-9.
Yeah, 36-9.
And I believe, like, if you really dig through, I don't know if you have it right in front of you. He's
I do.
fought a handful of past like UFC guys. So Hernani Perpetuo, Indio Pareja, Sergio
Ivan
Moraes,
George.
and he beat Ivan George, Batman, right?
Yep, Batman.
And lost to the previous 3, Perpetuo. Who else
And
did I just
Mendel
say?
de Oliveira,
Yeah.
who just got signed. He lost to him. But, I mean, a lot of decision losses to very decent fighters.
And I want to say 14 first-round finishes for this guy. So this is the kind of guy that comes out like a bat out of hell, does not go through the typical feel-out period, hell on wheels in the first couple minutes of the round.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from what I've seen of him, he's another guy that maybe isn't the best athlete in the world, but has fought enough and has trained for has been around for so long. He's got a lot of things he does well technically. He's not a bad striker. He's not a bad wrestler. He's not a bad grappler. He knows to be aggressive and push the fight, and he's got a good chin. So just kind of a tough, scrappy veteran journeyman that's been around a lot.
So I'm probably biased towards James Terry. I hold him in very, very high regard. So to counter that, why don't you lend your analysis on him before I?
All right. Yeah, I guess from my feelings of James Terry is that he's a very aggressive and decent athlete, but it doesn't feel like he's ever really quite put the kind of polish on his skills to consistently win tough fights. I mean, if he finds himself in something where it's going to be a battle of points, he's not necessarily the kind of guy that you're watching him being like, oh man, he's blowing that guy out of the water. He ends up in a lot of tough scraps. He's ended up losing some really close fights. I know that's kind of your sticking point for him. And but it is I would say that Andre Santos is the kind of fighter that he should beat, but it's also the kind of fighter that could easily take a really weird decision off him.
So my thing with James Terry is, if I had to line up guys who have, and I hate to say screwed, but let me put it this way: if you watch the bulk of his split decision losses, I think at the very least you'll walk away from that saying, that could have gone either way, and yeah, I can see how some people would have thought James Terry won. Let's see, that starts with, the Carlos Fodor fight. That was a unanimous decision. I believe I might have scored that for Fodor, but a lot of people thought he won that as well. But then I think it goes Nashan Burrell, Bobby Green, and then, is it Rick Reeves in Bellator?
Yeah.
Those are all split decision losses that, again, I think a lot of people thought Terry won. To try to be fair and unbiased, I think you can at least watch those fights and think it wasn't one of those cases where he was clearly beaten. If anything, I think fights like that you walk away going, damn, those guys are pretty much on the same level. In fact, the only guy I can think of that I've seen that soundly beat him without any questions was Tarek Safadine.
Yeah, well, other than his submission losses, yeah.
And I didn't see those.
He's got one to Mike Dellatorre.
Oh, another UFC guy, though, right? That Dellatorre?
No, that was at Arise Fighting Championships.
Right, but that's the same Dellatorre that's in the UFC now, right?
Oh yeah, that is the same Dellatorre. Yeah, I thought you said Bellator. Yeah, it's the same Dellatorre.
So, overall, I think James Terry is super, super legit. You can maybe argue you can argue he's not an elite fighter, but I do think that he is much better, because nobody knows who the fuck he is in plain terms. He came up as a wrestler, was a good wrestler, hooked up with Kung Lee and his boys, and I was really shocked before he fought Carlos Fodor, and he can put together some serious kickboxing combinations. I jiffed up one where he threw like a 6-punch combination, and the beauty of it is he let the first 2 or 3 go, and then the 3 or 4 strikes that followed up, he was making up on the spot. Based on where his opponent was moving and what was going on there. So he's just one of those guys that I think you should keep an eye on. I don't think he gets the respect or attention that he's due. Wow, perfect example here. Andre Santos is favored to win this. Probably based in, I guess that's somewhat understandable. Real serious record, a lot of finishes. Andre Santos is about minus 145 to minus 155 across the board. It's a close one though. James Terry comes in at almost plus 125 as an average all the way throughout. Yeah. I would definitely put Terry as the favorite in this one. Is that just me?
No, I think he's the better athlete, and they're both, neither guy is just an absolute world beater. So at that point, I usually would give the edge to the guy that I think has a little more power and is a little faster.
And honestly, I'm not sure who that's going to be, so I'm looking forward to this one. But the more you think about it, this should be a really good matchup, because James Terry, if you give him a one-dimensional fighter, I think that he would thrive because of his wrestling and his footwork and his striking. But Andre Santos is another all-rounder, so this could actually be a real exciting matchup. I'm kind of looking
Yeah,
forward to that one.
should be actually a pretty solid fight of veteran guys who fought a lot of good competition and haven't quite broken through into that mainstream.
Co-main event: Houston Alexander, Virgil Zwicker. I mean, Stand and Wang kind of. That's not to say these guys don't have a lot of skill, but both of these guys are known for wanting to keep it up and handle their business standing.
Yeah, no, it's Stan and Wang, no question about it. It's a battle of who's got the better chin, and quite frankly, I'd say it's probably going to be Zwicker. I mean, Houston Alexander is fun and all, but anyone who can kind of most people who can stick with him and who can throw at him with the same ferocity that he throws back tend to beat him. You know.
So, I'd agree. And I think my heart kind of goes out to Houston because originally he was going to fight James Thompson. So Houston is started out at 205, but has taken, like, I think the Kimbo Slice fight was at a catchweight. The James Thompson match would have been fun, great to watch. And I think he had a great chance there as well because the dynamics is James Thompson is a big, huge, gigantic man, well
Mm-hmm.
muscled, not very fleet of foot nor quick with his hands. So that is a guy where a smaller heavyweight like Houston Alexander with good striking would have been fun. He would have used his foot speed, his angles, and his quickness. So it would have been really that David and Goliath dynamic. Virgil Zwicker, he's a big dude, but he's not a monster. I want to say he's maybe 6'3", 6'4".
He's listed at 6'2", but he could be. I don't know how accurate that is.
I think he's a little bit taller than that. But either way, night and day difference as far as heavyweights go between James Thompson. I mean, he moves pretty well. He's a fairly athletic guy, really tough, rugged chin, and I mean, he's a gamer. This is the kind of dude that will keep throwing and throwing until someone is asleep. And I believe he's only got one knockout on his record, and that was LeVar Johnson.
Where one knockout loss, yeah, to
Yeah,
LeVar Johnson, which that's all just par for the course. I mean, if LeVar Johnson's beating you, he's certainly not going to do it by decision.
or by flying omoplata.
No, or by flying omoplata. It's true.
I want to say there's one or two other people that their only knockout loss ever is to LeVar Johnson too. So
Very likely, LeVar Johnson has in fact never ever been to a decision and won.
still,
Yeah, the
wait,
only decision, in fact, the only decision fight in his career is Brendan Schaub.
right? Which was, yeah, okay. So either way, LeVar Johnson is got to be one of the biggest punchers around.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything else you want to say on this one. This is going to be one where I'm just gonna kind of sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I just assume that if Zwicker's got a good chin on him, he's going to throw hard at Alexander. Alexander is a hard puncher, but he does not have the greatest chin in the world, so hard not to see Zwicker winning this.
And for whatever it's worth, in fights like this where it seems just destined to be a stand-up match, that's usually where, wisely, one fighter switches it up and just throws in a takedown here and there.
Yeah, I don't see
And
that happening with this one though.
no,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know who would switch it up. I guess Alexander might, but these two they seem like they have sort of the oh gosh, who was the guy who fought Robbie Lawler? And it was Strikeforce guy. Fought him.
Adlan Amagov.
No. The American just
Let's see.
recently
Tim
got released
Kennedy,
from the
Joey Villasenor got released from
the UFC. He fought Robbie Lawler in the UFC.
well, let's see who has Robbie fought in the UFC. Obviously Hendricks, Rory McDonald. That's all I can think of right now.
Okay, just a sec. It's Bobby Volker. They've kind of got that Bobby Volker mindset of just like, well, I'm not winning the striking battle. I better put my head down and punch harder. Like,
I forgot that they fought in the UFC.
yeah,
Lawler took
it
him
was a
out,
great
right?
fight actually.
Yeah, and I would agree. Although actually Bobby's a little more inclined just to grind and clinch up, where I think these guys like to have open space where they can let their hands go. So either way, moving on to the main event here. Josh Neer and Paul Bradley. Paul Bradley, a former, I believe, two-time All-American wrestler. He's another guy. I think he fought Mike Pierce twice, lost both, was really competitive the first time. Let's see, he lost to Rafael Natal in the UFC. I was actually fairly impressed. It's the kind of guy where at first he was more of a top control wrestler. It was the kind of fights that fans like to complain about. But despite losing some of those fights, he was game. He showed pretty good stand-up. Like, I was pretty surprised with his striking against Mike Pierce. I mean, we're not talking Machida-esque, but it was not a wrestler who only knew how to change levels and throw in a takedown. Polar opposites here. Paul Bradley's a beer keg-shaped, tough, durable wrestler, and Josh Neer is a tall beanpole scrapper. What are you thinking on this one?
Uh, Honestly, I mean, I think this is probably the kind of fight that Paul Bradley can still win and Josh Neer can't quite. I mean, it's hard not to love Josh Neer. He's forever been like the insanely tough scrapper who wins 3 out of every 5 fights he shouldn't. But I think we're now 60 fights into his or 50 fights into his career, and he may be slowing down just a little. And Bradley is still a very good athlete, and I mean his whole thing has just been that, kind of like I was talking about with we were talking about with James Terry, good athlete, strong guy, fast, diverse. Never quite put the polish on the rest of his skills. Bradley's a good wrestler, but his kickboxing is really wooden. Like, he does it a lot, and he has some power in his hands, but it's like these kind of punches, like that Matt Riddle fight where he's just kind of punching like straight ahead. It's just got that kind of robot style that it doesn't, it can beat some guys, but he can't usually get over the really good fighters. But I think at this point he could probably take Neer.
As far as his striking, it's like there's some strong guys who punch like they're flexing the whole time rather than loosen up. So but it's not bad. And the thing, Neer is like a lot of different fighters, sometimes likened to the Diaz brothers. I think mostly in mentality, and the fact that he's a striker and submission guy. Interestingly enough, I believe he started off as a wrestler, but he's kind of hard to get a beat on because there's times when he'll pull out solid. Like, I believe he choked out Bang Ludwig with a Darce choke. Mm-hmm. And then in the next fight or one shortly after, he got guillotined by Justin Edwards.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's kind of his style. He's not the kind of guy. It's not like he's completely reckless, but he is not the guy to only do whatever's safe. I mean, he's got a nasty clinch, really nasty elbows. To me, this is going to be a case of, I hate to say it, but it's all going to boil down to Bradley's takedowns, because I think he's going to be out. He's definitely outmatched reach and distance-wise and striking-wise on the feet. And I think Neer has shown the better submission acumen as well. So I don't think Bradley from the very first second is going to have to desperately dive on every takedown opportunity, but I think that's going to be definitely his best, arguably his only chance to really win this with any conviction.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could probably just sort of, I don't know, like it depends on, like I said, it depends on where Neer is at still in his career athletically. If he's slowed down at all after all this time in the cage, or if he's still just the exact same fighter he's always been. I think if he's the same fighter he's always been, he's probably craftier and more diverse than Bradley and can pull something out. If he's slowed down a bit, then Bradley, I think, can grind him, just kind of work him over against the fence, work him over on the ground, and make it kind of a slow, laborious fight.
So a couple interesting things came to mind just when you said that. Neer he got the nickname the dentist because he knocked a couple people's teeth out early in his career, but he's not a huge power striker. I can't remember a fight where he's loaded up and NyQuil'd somebody with one shot. which on one hand doesn't favor him. That means he he usually gets in close and just slowly, like a blender, chips away. But he is nasty in the clinch. So the other thing is that makes me wonder if Paul Bradley is going to try to move forward, clinch up, and then work some upper body or change levels from there, or whether he's going to change levels and shoot from outside. I would I think the latter is better, for his chances, but I would kind of like to see how his, I guess, he's going to be the aspiring takedown artist, and Neer is going to look to dig an underhook and, smash him with dirty boxing and elbows. So that aspect of the fight is fairly intriguing to me.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a well-matched fight, I think, right now. Both, you don't look at this and say, oh yeah, one guy's easily got all the advantages here. So I mean it's not a card that's going to excite anyone. It doesn't even excite me, but it's certainly not a poorly matched card. I don't look at any of the fights on this and go, oh man, that's just a blowout for this guy. It's a well-matched card, just not a lot of big, exciting fights that are really going to get you to tune in.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I don't mind that they do it all, but they really are giving two unknowns, a shot in Davin Clark and Andre Santos. So usually there's 0 or 1 on the card, and it's kind of interesting that half of the card will feature, a matchup with one unknown slash, could be future prospect kind of thing. So, anything else you want to add on this before we depart?
I guess the only other things to note are that it's also going to have, I believe, their first 145-pound women's fight between Josette Colton and Holly Lawson. Not much to know about either of these women. They're pretty young in their careers. I'm not even sure that either of them have ever fought at 145 pounds before. They both look like they've come in significantly heavier than that in the past. And it also is going to have Anthony Smith, who's trying to rebuild after a run in Strikeforce and the UFC that saw him hit the bricks and lose to Josh Neer, and he's picked up a win in Bellator since then. He's going to be fighting a sort of long-time journeyman, and that should be kind of an interesting fight since Smith is still only 26 and has been around for a while now.
So I give Bellator credit in that a long time ago they were showing a lot of women's fights. Zoila, Megumi Fuji. None of those were at featherweight, huh?
No, they were all 125. Those were all flyweight.
Wasn't there a couple 135ers in there too?
There might have been briefly, but
it's been a while. I don't remember whatsoever.
I mean, like Jessica I fought there, but even she fought Zoila Gurgel. But Gurgel went up and down in weight, so I don't know if her fights were all at flyweight or not, but certainly flyweight was what they were shooting for.
Well, and on that note, another one I forgot to mention for next week, Marloes Coenen making her Bellator debut, and I think she has an adorable personality. Number one, she's just likable, and I think she's a super game fighter. I mean, she's got a lot of top 10 wins and a couple losses. In Cyborg, she lost to Cyborg. Those are her high-profile matches, but Cyborg's like an anomaly in MMA, in women's MMA, I should say. So I'm excited to have her back on board for sure.
Oh yeah, no, it'll be fun to see Coenen fight. I always like watching her fight. She's part of the women's MMA old guard, and so not going to be that much longer. And we should enjoy it while she's still there.
And exciting. I mean, she's well-rounded, but I love to watch her grapple. She is a crafty grappler. So. All right, we'll wrap it up here unless you have anything final on life, MMA, taxes.
No. I think we've covered everything about life that needed covering. I'm sure has been covered before.
Indeed, we have. So if Zane can finally get his schedule screwed, a little more stable, we'll try to do these shows earlier in the weekend and be a little more prepared. Other than that, I'm Dallas Winston. I'm saying bye. You want to plug yourself? Self-promote.
I'm Vince Simon. Whatever, you know where to find me. If you want to find me, I'm findable.
Well said. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye.